So my talk for today is on breaking the chains of your prison. But first, a joke. There's a very fat pheasant and a bull grazing in a yard, grazing in a field. And as they're grazing together, all of a sudden the pheasant looks up at this tree and goes, "Oh, I used to be able to climb to the top of this tree, and now I can't even make the first branch." And the bull says, "All you got to do is eat my dung, and you'll be able to get up to the top of that tree again." And the pheasant's like, "What? Eat your dung?" "Yeah, I'm not kidding you. If you eat my dung, I promise you will make it to the top of that tree." So the pheasant, thinking he has nothing to lose, starts eating the dung. And sure enough, within a day, he makes it to the first branch. And after a couple of days, makes it to the top of the tree. Well, a farmer sitting in his yard sees this fat pheasant sitting on top of a tree, takes out a shotgun and shoots it for dinner. The moral of the story is you can make it to the top on bullshit, but you can't stay there. All righty then. Breaking the chains of your prison. Anytime you say to yourself or somebody else, "This is just who I am," you have imprisoned yourself. Anytime you say, "I can't help it, that's just my response to it, that's how I reacted," you have imprisoned yourself. I've told the story, and I'm going to tell it again, about how since I was a kid, thought my way to happiness was freedom. And I worked really hard all of my early life to gain the freedom so that no one could tell me what to do, when to do it, that I'd have all the money I need and all the freedom I wanted to do whatever I want. And I achieved that. Sold a business for a lot of money, and we moved to Asheville, North Carolina, my wife at the time and my kid and I. And one day I'm standing on this bridge and I break down crying as to how miserable I am after realizing I achieved what I thought would bring me happiness. And it wasn't because freedom was the issue. The issue was my definition of it. I actually thought that freedom outside myself could bring me joy, could bring me happiness. Maybe you've done that. Set a goal for yourself and then achieve that goal, had the immediate reaction of joy and happiness, but after a little while, that fades. And then what are you left with? Thinking you got to achieve the next thing. I mean, that's what happens in football. People win the Super Bowl. A team wins the Super Bowl, and they have this incredible celebration. And then the next year comes, and they got to start all over again. And they go through the same struggle year after year after year. If you ever wanted to see a perfect example of futility, it is football. Because every time you win, you got to do it again. So joy cannot rest in any goal. Now, I've spoken on that particular piece before, but today in particular, I want to talk about how we imprison ourselves with our thinking, with the way we think about ourselves, with the way we think about the world. Have you ever heard yourself say to yourself, "If only this happened, if only this, then"? That is an imprisoning thought. You have locked yourself into an idea that has limited your ability to have joy in life. If only we have a different president. If only we win the Democrats win the Senate. And for those who are Republican, if only the Republicans hold on to the Senate. These are imprisoning thoughts. Now, many imprisoning thoughts come with incredibly good reasons. I am sure there are many of you here who could list the reasons why it's good that Biden won the presidency, while there are others who can list all the good reasons why it would have been better if Trump won. Why it'd be better if the Democrats win the Senate. Why it would be better if the Republicans hold on to it. All those thoughts are imprisoning you. Every single one of them. They are limiting your ability to have joy now. And it is only through the practice. And it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice to let go that which imprisons us. Now, I have some experience in all this because at a very young age, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And I'm talking about 14. At the time, I was the youngest person on the planet ever diagnosed with that disease. I had such urgency around finding bathrooms. I was going 16 to 18 times a day that I could barely leave my apartment. But what I noticed is that didn't happen on days of baseball. That I could go play a 3-hour baseball game and not have any urgency. And at a young age, I started wondering about that. How, if it was a school day, urgency was all that was on my mind. But if I had a tennis match or if I had a baseball game, which were the two sports I excelled at as a kid, I was able to do that. And I started realizing even then that my mind had a dramatic effect on the physical reality that would show up for me. Now, this is the heart of science of mind. But what I found further was the freedom in that. The freedom in knowing that how I perceive, how I think about things has impact not only in a physical reality, but in my way of feeling about myself, in my way of moving through life. It's what got me on the spiritual path in the first place, was noticing that little thing of how I could get through a baseball game or a tennis match, and yet struggled so much, pretty much every other area of my life, to get more than a half hour, 40 minutes without needing a bathroom. So I began my spiritual journey with all this. And the funny part about it is I mean, many of you know, because I've spoken about this, that even that I barely ever get sick. And even when I do get a fever, it's gone in a day, that I have gained tremendous dominion over my body at this point in my life. And I have. And that is freedom. Dominion is freedom. And I've been able to do that because I've let go of so much around thinking that what other people say about me is real. Like a doctor's diagnosis. Now, am I saying to you, don't get diagnosed by doctors? I want you to know, I want to be very clear that that is not what I'm saying. I am simply saying that you have dominion over your own freedom. And anytime you give it away to somebody else, you've done exactly that. You've heard me talk about Hurricane Carter, who was imprisoned for 25 years. And after being in prison 23 years, said he felt freer than he ever had in his entire life. Now, how could that be? He was locked behind bars. And yet, that was his experience. Now, once that was his experience, it was only a couple of years later he was let free, that they discovered that he was innocent. And the thing was, where you might think that somebody after that many years in prison might feel some resentment towards the people who put him behind bars, because he had reached such a level of freedom within himself, he actually felt gratitude for it. He recognized that this was his path to freedom. Can you do that for your life? Whatever you think is imprisoning you is actually your path to freedom. Whatever you think has a hold on you is actually your path to freedom. That's what I learned from having ulcerative colitis, or being diagnosed of ulcerative colitis at 14, was that it was my path to freedom. Now, the funniest part about this, for me, is that with all this knowing, I forget all the time. I get caught up in drama on a daily basis. And the second I'm caught up, I have imprisoned myself. And then I have to remember all over again. And so there's a practice here that is a continuing practice that I, for one, cannot tell you gets easier. Because that hasn't been the case for me personally. I have to be vigilant. I have to remind myself sometimes 20, 30, 40 times a day of that my freedom, that anything that I have going on in my head, any upset I have towards anybody is upset that is imprisoning me. Any upset I have towards any circumstance is a circumstance I am allowing to imprison me. We do that to ourselves. We do that to ourselves every single day. We are attached to a particular outcome happening a particular way. When we lose trust in a process that is much larger than ourselves. In our prayer, right, in our spiritual mind treatment, we talk all the time about how there's only one power, one presence that encompasses everything, larger than the universe. And yet, for some reason, we think that this power that encompasses larger than the universe, we don't trust in it enough to handle whatever it is that's going on in our lives. So we get upset. And the second we're upset, we forgot. The second you're upset, you have imprisoned yourself in a small world that has forgotten that you are one with the power that created a universe, and have lost your trust in that power. That is what we teach here in the science of mind, to grow our trust in whatever's unfolding before our eyes is our path to freedom. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is. Welcome it. Welcome it as, oh, here it is. Another way for me. This must be my path because it's in front of me. This is what's in front of me. So this must be my path to freedom. I'm upset about this. Well then, this must be my path to freedom. Oh, what happened there is such a bummer. Oh my God, what's going to happen to the world? Oh, this must be my path to freedom. The more I look at the world this way, the more I am able to let go what others do, what others say, what circumstances may be before me, the more freedom I gain. And that's the thing about freedom. It's not black or white. It's not as if we're stuck here in a situation where either we're free or we're not. It's more like it continually unfolds for us. It's something that we get to continually be a part of and feel the next layer and feel the next layer and feel the next layer so that we can continue to grow into a larger and larger and larger space of freedom. Whether there's ever a point in which the cage falls away completely and there's nothing left to be free about, I've had moments like that. Whether it's maintainable, I am not somebody who can answer that question. I don't know. I do know it's worth it every single time I remember. Every single time I bring myself back to that space of this is worth it, to feel this level of freedom that I have achieved now in this moment. I was rereading a book for, I don't know, the 5th, 10th time. I don't know how many times I've read it. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And it's got this great part in it where after Siddhartha, just for anybody who doesn't know the story, I'll go through it quickly. It's about a prince from a very rich house who realizes that there's a whole world out there that he's separate from and doesn't want to be separate from anymore because people suffer, and wants to learn more about that. So he leaves his house, starts working with gurus, starts becoming part of the people, renounces his past, and even winds up working for a while with the Buddha. But then at some point feels that even this path to enlightenment is too separate from people. And so he goes to a merchant and says, I want to work for you. And the merchant says, well, what skills you got? And he goes, well, I can think, I can wait, and I can fast. And so the merchant goes, well, I don't know if that's going to be how is that useful here? And so Siddhartha walks him through some of the ways in which, like, being able to wait and fast and think are really helpful in any situation at all. And it also leaves him very detached from how things work out. So the merchant decides to give him a try and finds out he's really good with numbers because he can think and has a very clear head. Gets him involved in his business, and it isn't long before Siddhartha becomes very rich. In fact, so rich that he starts getting attached to some of those riches and starts hating himself for his attachment. Now, why am I bringing you this story around imprisoned? Because when he first started working with the merchant, he felt very free. But by the time he was rich and full and overweight and had all these things, all these possessions, all of a sudden he didn't feel so free anymore. All of a sudden he wasn't able to fast. He got hungry way too quick. He wasn't able to wait because he became very impatient. And all this clouded his thinking. The original title of my talk was What Really Matters. And as I was reading this story, I thought what really matters is what we bring to life, not what life gives to us. Anything life gives to us can be a prison. Now, am I saying we should all just be poor aesthetics in the world? No. Again, that is not my point. Because in everything I'm talking about, there is a huge amount of degrees, and you have to find your place with it. What works best for you? And I promise you, your place with it is going to be different than my place with it, is going to be different than your neighbor's place with it, is going to be different than your best friend's place with it. Each of us has to find our own place, but beware it imprisoning you. Because not only will your possessions do that, but your thoughts will. We have the ability to continually grow, which means any way in which we think of ourselves now, if we crystallize it, we have imprisoned ourselves. Each of us is an expansion of the universe. Each of us has the universe within us and without us. And if we think of ourselves as less than that, we are imprisoned. Let us not imprison ourselves this day. Let us know, just as Siddhartha finally realized as he walked away from all that stuff to go back to what he really knew was important, which was his own joy and freedom to think, to wait, to fast. We have that within ourselves, each of us. The ability to focus on that which is above all that is going on in our world today. Oh no, there's this virus. Now, am I saying be silly with it like I see some people doing? No. But don't let that imprison you either, or the way you think it should be handled. There are so many ways in which we should in ourselves, and that is imprisoning too. When you're thinking, think about your thoughts and ask the question, are these thoughts imprisoning me? Do they somehow limit my freedom by thinking this way? And if they do, be willing to try letting them go. If you've never tried that before, just letting go of thought because you were so sure it was right, give it a shot. It's an incredibly freeing feeling to let a thought that you're sure is right go. It's easy to let go of thoughts you're not so sure about. But if you got a thought that you're so sure this is the way it is, that's one that's imprisoning you. And that's a good one to play around with letting go of. Give it a shot. See how it goes. Break through those chains of yours, open to something that you've never seen before. The more I do it, the more life expands, the more wondrousness it becomes. This can be an amazing journey. Don't get stuck in thinking it can be any less than universal, because that's who you are. And I love you. Thank you. That is my talk for today.
God is the source of all supply. Money is God in action. What I give, I receive multiplied abundantly. All that God is, I am, and so it is.